Welcome everyone to an intergenerational exchange with Teach the Future. And Peter, I'll let you, without further ado, Peter Bishop, former chair of the Futures Studies Master's Program at the University of Houston, and president or chair of founder of Teach the Future.
Great. And Catherine knows that program very well because she's one of our most illustrious graduates, I'm proud to say. Thank you very much, Catherine, for hosting us here. And thank you for Alethea for scheduling this session. It is my pleasure to head this panel and facilitate this discussion about, and this is a mouthful, intergenerational dialogue, because we know at Teach the Future, for those of you that may not heard about Teach the Future yet, we're an organization that promotes futures thinking for young people. As Catherine said, I taught older people, graduate students in the university for many years. And when I retired, I said, who's talking to young people? And I found out that almost nobody is. And so along with colleagues like Alethea and others, we are promoting this in schools and outside of schools. So this is the outside of school version of Teach the Future. We're giving young people and older people a chance to dialogue about the future, what they believe their perspective is. And welcome, Dia. And so my job is primarily just to set up the question rather than simply talk about ourselves, which is wonderful because we got some great people here on this panel. I also thought we'd all consider the same question. We want to bring young people into the discussion about the future. As I like to say, they have more future ahead of them than we do. Guillermina and Lucio, we have a future ahead of us too. I think you will agree, but ours is a little shorter. And so we really want young people to be active and to be involved in the future, both in school and outside. So the interesting question to me is, what's the difference? Is there a difference between what each generation is talking about how they approach the future, what they believe would happen, what they want to see happen? And I think having young people at the table, even if we're saying all the same things, is fine, because we need to have them there. We need to listen to each other, and they need to have the experience of talking about the future, even when they're in high school or in college, so that when they do get in positions of decision, they know how to do that. They feel confident in talking about the future. So whether or not we say different things or not, it is not particularly important, but it's an interesting question to me, because of course the young people we deal with, which tends to be 25 years or younger, have woken up in a different world. I woke up in a world a long time ago, I can tell you, and have come to look, like and adapt to this world. But these young people haven't had to adapt to anything yet. This is their world. This is what they found on their plate when they woke up in the world, I call it, waking up in the world. And is there a difference between how they think of the future and how we, who have had the experience of living through the recent past, at least the last 50 or 60 years, how we experience the future? So we've had conversations with these panelists. I've asked them that question in email and to some extent in person. So I hope each one of them has something to say to that question. Is there a difference that they've noticed between what the young people say and want in the future versus what the older people say? And we have obviously representatives from both generations in this dialogue. So I'll ask them to say a few words, 3 or 4 minutes maybe, in terms of what their answer to the question is. If there is time for each one, I would like to ask a little follow-up question, and so that we can have actually a discussion. That would be wonderful. And then after that, we'll ask the attendees and the people who are participating in this, if they would like to ask a question. You have a couple of buttons on your Zoom screen. There's a chat, of course, and I will open the chat myself to see if there's anybody who wants to ask a question. And secondly, there's also a Q&A button. I don't know how to get to that, so maybe Catherine has access to the Q&A button. So once we hear from the panelists, we'll open it up for general conversation. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here today. I have organized the list in a very systematic manner. One young person and one older person, one after the other. We have, and also of each one in alphabetical order. So this is not personal. This just happens to be where your name appears in the alphabet. So the very first of these is then our friend Dia from India. Dia is, as all the young people are, they are recognized by Teach the Future as winners in what's called the Next Generation Young Voices competition. They propose projects and present videos, and each one of these were one of the top 10 winners in one of the last 3 years. Dia and her colleague Saithi from India actually were recognized this year for their grassroots e-waste recycling and awareness initiative. So this is an environmental initiative that they're proposing in India. It's a wonderful one. The judges were very impressed with all the work that they're doing. So Dia, you get to lead off here. How about that? We're welcome. Turn your mic on if you would, and tell us what your response is to that question. Do you hear different things from older people and younger people about what they think the future will occur or what they want in the future?
Yeah. Hi, good morning. I'm Dia. So what are people from different generations doing for the future? Frankly, everything we do does affect our personal future, the environment, the society. And one of the areas it's had the spotlight for so long, but hasn't been getting the attention it needs is the environment. Every day, the Earth reaches a new low or a new high when it comes to temperatures. And what are we doing about this? People from various generations have diverse approaches to dealing with complex challenges posed by climate change. The global issue is frequently referred to as one of the most defining and pressing challenges of our time, given the relentless trend of extreme temperatures. The youngest members, like 16-year-old climate activists, view the future as a race against time. They lead climate strikes, urgently demanding sustainable practices and immediate action from world leaders, recognizing that today's choices that they make shape the futures that they inherit. Conversely, older generations bring some of the wisdom and experience to the table. Some of them actively embrace sustainable living in daily practices and advocate for environmentally friendly policies. And they also invest in cleaner, more sustainable alternatives. Generation X, born between the mid-60s to the early 80s, adopts a pragmatic approach to environmental issues, engaging in moderate practices like recycling and energy efficiency, where they emphasize on balanced solutions. On the other hand, millennials, born between 81 to 96, lead in the digital activism and focus on systematic changes within institutions to drive significant environmental impact. Environmental issues often get lost in the noise of social media, struggling to hold our attention amid our fast-paced lives. However, the environment's problems won't disappear with a swipe on our screens. The challenge is to make environmental concerns an integral part of our daily lives, with each of us playing a vital role in shaping our shared future. Ignoring the environment's call may lead to an undesirable future. And the younger generation has been taking action by making impactful social media posts and many different ways in social media, such as fundraisers. Raising environmental awareness is challenging due to the overwhelming content on social media, which can lead to fatigue. To address this, we must make the environment relatable to our daily lives, emphasizing on its impact on our existence. And one crucial aspect that often contributes to the environmental issue being sidelined is the vast generational gap between the perspectives and priorities. Each generation views climate change as through a lens of their own unique experiences and values, which can sometimes lead to a disconnect in understanding and action. Younger generations, such as Generation Z and millennials, have grown up in a world where climate change is an extreme, stark reality, witnessing weather events and alarming climate reports, and they kind of demand urgent climate action. But in contrast, older generations, especially baby boomers and Generation X, recall a time when environmental awareness was emerging. So some are skeptical about human impact on climate change or advocate for gradual change. My partner Sahibi will speak now.
Ethan is, yes, also winner of the NGFP 2023 award. They did their initiative, environmental initiative together. Saithi, Dia just gave us a wonderful overview of generational differences. Do you have something to add to her comments?
Yeah, so Dia summed it up pretty perfectly as to why climate change is such a stark reality for my generation when it really wasn't for the previous generations. Another thing I would like to add on to as to why the differences between the way the older generations think and the younger generations think is the older generations often view our generation as, let's say, angry or emotional, especially these climate activists such as Greta Thunberg or other activists like Malala Yousafzai. They're viewed as very emotional when they don't have to be. But I personally believe that anger is not bad. It shouldn't have that negative connotation. Anger simply means that you're alive. That emotional intensity can be channeled into a positive force. Your intensity is only useful when it's directed towards good. In example, as a personal anecdote, me and Dia, we've started e-cycle because we were very stereotypical teenagers. We were very emotional, we were very angst filled, especially towards these major issues which we thought we couldn't have a say in, such as climate change. It seems like such a huge problem that only corporations can deal with, and we have no say in. But as we have shown through eCycle, we've become a channel of climate advocacy, not just on a local level, but on an international level through this, even this conference. So I think that is what me and Dia's take on this is that climate change is a very stark reality and we need to address it as the younger generation. And the older generations, we need their support. We need them to invest in our generation. Thank you.
Well, this is wonderful. I mean, if I'm going to step out of my facilitator's role in a second, and just as you and Dia have been talking, I realize the stark difference between our generations, and I'll sit with Guillermina and Lucille here as members of the older generation. You guys are expecting to have to experience a lot more climate change than we are. I mean, you'd think I would know that already, but if my life is another, I hope, a couple of decades, your lives are many, many decades, and the slow effects of climate change will come into your life a lot more than it will into mine. That by itself is an urgent difference between the two of us. You guys are going to experience it. We're going to experience the beginning of it, but not all of it. So I thank you for those ideas. That was really fantastic. I appreciate it. All right, let me turn to the other, since I've just more or less took the time being taken the place and given that comment from an older generation. Let me turn to Andres, who is our next young generation. Andres is from Colombia. He is actually, believe it or not, a member of the World Future Studies Federation, a junior member it's called. Thank you very much for doing that. And he was an NGFP award winner in 2021, where he works on streaming to help educate and create a better future for all. So Andres, we're talking about any differences that you've noticed between the way the older and the younger generations approach the future or what they want to see happen. Can you turn on your camera and your microphone, please?
Yes, hi. I'll try it. I don't know if my camera is working.
That's fine.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
it's
good. There
working.
you are.
So, give me a sec, please.
Sure.
So, the biggest difference between our perspectives of future, isn't it? So, I think that young people have more pressure when it comes to thinking about the future due to the problems that humanity has recently begun to suffer, like the climatic change. For our parents, the world was full of resources to use, but for us, the young people, we see the future as a good that has to be prioritized for our survival and our quality of life and the future generations. Also, the technology differences. For example, my generation grew up with a lot of facilities, internet facilities. My parents' generation didn't have it, so that's the difference that I have noticed.
Great. Okay, Andres, that's terrific. What difference do you think that's the world you grew up in, as Dia and Saithi have mentioned, has technology as simple fact? When I grew up, television was a fact. That doesn't sound like a very modern technology, but that was the most modern technology when I was your age. What difference do you think that makes for people thinking about the future? Do young people think differently about technology than older people?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, what way? And what's
For
the difference?
example, I think the most clear example is in my school. In my school, when our teacher assign us homeworks and something like that, they really want that we don't use technologies facilities. Like, I don't know, um, AIs,
Mhm.
AIs, I think is the name,
Yeah, yeah.
because they think these technologies didn't let us learn how to do the work for ourselves. But I think, and my friends also think that that technology and that are only tools for us for learn in a easier way. You know?
Right. That's wonderful. Again, it reminds me of my own time when I was a young person. We were not allowed to use calculators in class, which sounds totally silly today. I mean, the calculator on your iPhone, we had to memorize all the multiplication tables and all the addition and subtraction, and because we didn't have calculators all the time. So that was one way that we think about. Does anybody the other panelists want to ask Andres a question about his observations of how um, the differences are between the generations? No questions right now. Okay, that's good. Well, let's move on to one of the panelists who will speak on behalf of older generations. And Guillermina, would love to introduce you. Guillermina is a professor of political and social sciences at the Autonomous University of Mexico City, in Mexico City. She is a longtime friend of Futures, and she and I would meet often. I hope you remember Guillermina at the World Future Society. Some of the best hugs happened at at that time. I loved it, and along with Alethea, we would get together every year wherever the World Future Society happened to be. So, Guillermina, can you give us your observation on what differences you might see between older generations' views of the future and younger ones? Turn on your microphone, Guillermina. Yeah.
Yes, I say thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I love this. I love Peter. um, uh, um, I have a little presentation, a short presentation. I
Please do.
want to say this presentation and to see if, comments for the guys. Yes,
Okay,
may
please
I?
do. Yes.
Um, ¿Pueden ver la pantalla? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, I can see it. Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
I can see. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Uh-huh. It's something you have to think. What about when you are an older persons? There is a significant change from breathing, but also from the type, from where a devalued imagine is returned. At this moment, los take it excuse me. At this moment, Luz take it center stage. Furthermore, he begins to see the limit of his own life as more precise, and he faces the fundamental grief that he must process, that of his entire life. It is time to restore old age, is due dignity, and assume it as a natural stage of a full human life. Losses in old age. When these supports break down, the subject enters a crisis, a situation of loneliness which becomes structural, especially in urban regions. The elderly must then face a number of losses, griefs of a partner, siblings, friends, losing his own body due to the passage of time or illness, sexual losses, loss in economic production capacity, loss in the ability to support his family, and so all of this implies, in addition, the loss of the assigned place in the primary group and within society itself. At this crossroads, the old man lives a situation of great anguish, helplessness, and loneliness. Then we need to reorganize life. You think, no, that's why we are here passing through. Whenever possible, without giving up, get along with everyone. Solve all your pending issues. Walk peacefully among the noise and rush, and remember the peace that can exist in silence. The footprints of people who walk together are never erased. If I cannot solve all the worries in my life, at least I can try to avoid them. Give them their true dimension. Sleep until the body wakes up. Shower with warm water. Contemplate the sea. Emanate vibration of loves, tranquility, a peaceful mind. A relief here is the path for human beings. Instead of looking for conflicts, we have to look for relief, well-being, happiness. And then maybe you are in the fork on the road. It is the metaphor of the encrucijada. Noveto Bobbio said, wisdom for an old man consists in resignedly accepting one's own limits. But to accept them, you have to know them. I have become a wise man. I know the limits well, but I don't accept them. I admit them only because I have no choice. My old age is melancholy old age, understanding melancholy as the awareness of what I have, not a child, nor I will be to a child. Old age then becomes the moment in which we realize that the path not only has not been complete, but that there is no longer time to complete it, and that we must give up on achieving the last stage. Another opinion is the Rita Levi Montalcini. I think, unlike Bobbio, that we should not live on age remembering the past, but rather making plans for the time we have left, whether it is a day, a month, or for a few years, in the hope of carrying our projects that we do not could be undertaken in the years of youth. See? Yes. And then what we are recommended to you in these times of climate, of wars, climate change. What can we do? What can you do if you are a young, a really youth? Then you need to identify your capabilities. It's a
Pero me
word.
refería a que abarcara.
It's a word. It means abilities and skills. You can build your preferable future with cognitive, emotional, somatic, anticipatory, technological, and sociocultural intelligence. This is important for every uh, every youth in this time. For older, the only future we know for sure is the only thing you can be sure of this is that in a while you will no longer be here. Then enjoy what you have now. You can take nothing with you wherever you go, be it energy, be it the soul, be it some power, be it the light. Close circles, fix the earrings. Tell those you know that you love them every moment. Every time you walk away, when you say goodbye, I love you very much is a magical phrase. Then, maybe, so despite everything, it's worth it. And whatever you desire, an aspiration, in the noise of confusion of life, live in peace with your soul. Despite all their frauds, their routine, and their broken dreams, it is possible to build together a beautiful world. Thank you very much.
Oh, gracias, Guillermina. Oh, that is absolutely beautiful. We've had a lot of mentions in the chat that people want to get your text, and if you will send that to me or Alethea, that would be fantastic, and we'll give it out to the other people in the thing. Let me ask you, your description of old age is rather sad. Do you think everyone experiences that degree of loss that you described at the beginning? Or is there, if you practice some of the recommendations you made later in your presentation, perhaps it's not so sad? Is that the intent?
Dice
Well,
que si crees que todos experimentan esa pérdida que mencionas al principio y que si la propuesta que haces se aplica para todos.
exactamente, sí. Cuando ya somos viejos empezamos a perder familia,
English.
Well,
todo.
you can translate, Alethea, if you want. That's
Y
fine.
el sí aplica para todos, porque
Yeah, it applies for everybody
todos vamos a tener pérdidas ya
because
cuando,
we all are going to have losses.
ajá, ese
So
es el de
maybe
ser.
the difference, and I realized that as you got into the more positive parts of your presentation, that those recommendations apply to everyone, not just to older people. And oftentimes the difference may be that the younger generation, which has a whole life ahead of them, is not so much thinking about the end game, about the legacy, about the end. But we in future studies always ask people to begin with the end in mind. That's one of the phrases that we use. And the end does not have to be sad. The end can be a glorious end if we have meaning in all of the things that you mentioned in our lives. So I think it's perhaps a difference between the two generations is that we older people may think about those recommendations more than the younger people do, but everybody ought to practice life and walk in that way as you've described. It's very beautiful.
Mira, ¿me lo traduces, Ale?
Terrific. Any of the panelists have any questions for Guillermina? We're going to allow the attendees to ask some questions at the end of our time. I think we'll have a few minutes. So any questions from the panelists right now?
I will just quickly translate to her your ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia.
Yeah. Ajá. Dice que realmente esto aplica para todos, que no solo para la gente grande, que todos deberían estar pensando en eso, pero que obviamente la gente joven es la que menos lo hace. Sin embargo, esto es importante para todos. Y siempre una frase usada es decir que en los futuros tengamos el final en mente. Sin embargo, esto pues es más recurrente en los viejos que en los adultos. Sin embargo, esto lo debería hacer todo mundo.
Ujú, ujú, ujú. Así es. Y aparte, bueno, tenemos encima la preocupación del cambio climático, pero también todo lo nuestro, todo lo que somos como humanidad, como seres humanos, que no podemos dejarlo tampoco atrás.
That we have the climate change
Preocupación.
topic as a super worrying issue, and we can let that behind. ¿Y qué más?
No podemos dejar también nuestros sentimientos como seres humanos, nuestra construcción.
We cannot leave our
Seres
feelings as
humanos.
human beings aside.
Yes.
Eso es
Well,
lo que
community, you've given us really a very beautiful vision of the future, and I thank you for that. It's been wonderful having, and we'll get some questions to you maybe at the end of our session. So let me turn to another panelist, and this is Taina from Brazil. She was a NGFP recognized foresight practitioner in 2021, the very first year we offered the Young Voices Award. She is working to decrease the number of teenage pregnancies in Brazil through sex education and to empower and educate younger generations. Exactly something that you can do as a member of that young generation that we have a harder time doing as members of this older generation, Taina. But tell us about what you think the differences are between the generations and how they think about and what they want for the future.
I have to say, I also was not allowed to use a calculator in Brazil. I think I think in Brazil we're also not allowed.
I
But
thought that was old. I thought they had given that up, but no, it's still there. Okay.
yeah, I don't know why. I can just use a calculator.
Yeah.
At least makes no sense. But
I heard a young man tell his teacher one day, ma'am, you said I may not have a calculator. I always have a calculator. So that's not a good reason anymore, right? So Taina, tell us about your perspective.
yes, so I put in five categories, but I think we differ in how we act, the hope that we feel, how we do our work, how we deal with fast changes, and also the barriers we experience. But when it comes to how we act, um, there's this thing that I'm exploring in therapy right now, for example, that is your jump to conclusion and what you're going to think. And I see, especially with the use of technology, I would say older generations are easier to jump to conclusion when they see, for example, a news online. Um, I don't know. I think probably everyone has had an episode similar to this, but I have a grandma who uses WhatsApp. And she will come up to me and tell me, "Did you know this is true?" And I'm like, "No, grandma, that's WhatsApp." So I think especially the older generations really see this internet as something more plausible and have more faith in the sources than the younger generation who grew up with them have. And then when thinking about the hope that we feel, at least in my work in activism, whenever someone is giving a lecture or a talk and they are a part of an older generation, they always say they are hopeful for the future because of the younger generation. That's a pattern that I see a lot. While I would say the younger generation are less hopeful because they do not feel the space to do that change. And think we can even see that on the amount of activists nowadays who are well known and are young. We can think of Greta and we can think of Malala, but usually those are the examples that people would know, or they wouldn't know examples of activists in Brazil if you ask just a normal day civilian. So there's this lack of understanding on how can we act, especially when looking at the boards and who's occupying power spaces. And then for how we do the work, I heard once a talk that was really good by Kuminaido. He's a South African activist known for his work with Greenpeace and Amnesty International. And I agree totally that the difference with the younger generation is that we see intersectionality as a big thing. I think there's even going to start to have critics because people use that word so lightly nowadays. But you don't see people anymore saying usually I'm an activist for gender, because they know that it involves sustainability or economical causes. And even in waves of movements, when we look at feminism, for example, and second wave and how that was focused on white privileged American women, and now it's moving on to the fourth wave or fifth wave, whatever you like in that argument and that whole debate, into something that's more, we understand that there's different needs for different types of women and different types of people. And I also think the way that we work changes a lot. I've had experience working with older people mostly in the last few years. And I definitely noticed that when I'm in a team, there's this activism jargon that's called sexify, which is basically, I think, how the younger generation tends to act, which is we want to make everything fun, or we want to make everything educational, also seem plausible for someone who's using TikToks and has lost their attention span. So, for example, when I was campaigning for candidates in Brazil in the 2022 election, I made a Tinder for presidents where you could see the bio of the last president, and every single president had a bio that was a funny, quirky joke about their time. So, for example, Fernando Collor was, you thought I was going to steal your heart, I stole your bank account. And it's just a kind of way that we use to work where everything is less serious, I think, because of the seriousness of the way that we grew up with the pandemic and everything. And because of that, I think we're more able to deal with fast changes. But at the same time, also, I brought this earlier when we talked last week, but I think it also matters on what kind of youth are we talking about, because I also do understand that the ones who are on this panel today are the minority and are the ones that had a certain level of privilege where we could get this information. For example, I know I'm privileged to go to Grinnell College at the moment and be able to have my sociology professor teaching me racial critical theory, when in a state university, maybe the professor wouldn't be allowed at the moment. And especially when looking into my country, Brazil, I made a research that was really interesting with in all of the areas in all the 5 regions with young girls from ages 6 to 18. And we found that the most common 5 barriers were the stereotypes and violence, especially in certain areas in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. The infrastructure of schools, the access to internet, which even Andres mentioned, and it's thinking, does everyone really have access to that information? Is everyone who's a Gen Z fast-paced and using TikTok, or is there people who do not have access to that? Recognizing the abilities and interests of people, I think there's this doubling down, and always in some circumstances in families, I saw an example of a girl who told her father she wanted to be an astronaut when she was, I think, 6 years old or 7. And the father left and said, you cannot do that. Be a housewife or be a professor in like an elementary school, and that's your option. And the girl was heartbroken, and she stopped thinking from that point on about a career in STEM, for example. And then just exploring curiosity and helping people see that there are ways that they can improve or change the world, and how currently it works with professions. We found out that the 3 professions girls want the most in Brazil is to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, to be a police officer, which are very conservative when we think with artificial intelligence and everything that's going on. Are those truly going to be the professions of the future that are going to bring in the most revenue? Because if they're not, then if girls are not interested in that, then we're not a part of the future. So I think those are the main differences that I found out.
Oh, Taina, I can't believe I should have been taking notes. I can't wait until Alethea and Catherine send out the video so I can write down all the wonderful things that you said. And I have to tell you that I had exactly that same experience with my younger daughter. She was going to college, and I said, "What are you going to major in?" And she said, "Print journalism." And I said, "Your father is a futurist. You know that print journalism is going away." But now she is a foresight professional and an educational consultant doing excellent work in her profession. So it really, I feel sorry for the little astronaut young girl. I hope that she recovered from that, because fathers sometimes don't believe that their young children can do it. And the one statement you made is that that basically the older generation, you believe, tends to pass on the responsibility for solving the problems that we have not solved. Well, I hope the younger generation is going to be better at this than I. It'd be interesting to explore. We don't have time, but it'd be interesting to explore how confident your generation is in terms of actually solving these problems when you're in positions of authority and positions of decision making. So, Taina, thank you very much. It was really, really a terrific one. It is my pleasure now to introduce Tia Aftab. Tia is participated in the NGFP competition last year, was recognized for her initiatives to increase the confidence among girls through honing leadership skills and community building. Just like Taina, she is also in college in the United States at the University of California, Berkeley, studying mostly environmental science, which is a very young generation kind of a topic. Thank you. Tia, it's wonderful to hear from you about your observations on differences between the generations and their approach to the future.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for having me. Everyone said really interesting things, and I feel like there's so many things that have already been touched upon, but I feel like there's just so much to look at when we're looking at like the differences between generations. And I really sort of resonate with what Taina said, because I guess it doesn't really uniformly apply throughout. Everyone, even within the same generation, would have had different experiences. So even though right now we'll be talking broadly about it, I feel like it still varies within generations, how we may approach the future or how one may think. But the way that I sort of see it is three-pronged. So, I mean, obviously for me, the surroundings or where you grew up, or essentially where you're from, what your surroundings, your environment, your family, culture, all of these things are really important in framing just the way that you think, as they were for me as well. So firstly, I would say like in terms of nature and like society, so sort of where you grew up, which country, the culture that you grew up with really makes a difference in that sense. So for me, I grew up in Pakistan, and I've come to the US for university, and I'm already seeing so much of a difference in the way that I might think, as opposed to my classmates, who are also obviously very like, they're in the same generation, but regardless of that, they grew up with a different sort of culture around them. And that is coming out really just now, which is why I feel like it's important to consider just the different aspects of that as well. But I guess a pretty important thing for me is that with older generations, we've talked about this, but just in the idea that the future is going to fix it for us, or there's a very common saying, and I feel like a lot of us might have had that said to us at some point, is just, oh, you guys are the leaders of the future, or you guys are gonna fix this, or this is something that I know you guys can do. And I feel like while of course it's great that there is that much faith in the future generations, I feel like that's a way of just passing over responsibility and trying to shut out issues that very much still exist and impact everyone. So that's something that I feel like, I guess, generations can work on all together, because I don't think this is something that changes. So say that our generation is going to get older 20 years down the line, we'll be saying the same thing to future generations. And I feel like because you're just throwing away responsibility when you say that, you're sort of, essentially you're kind of shutting aside the problem and just expecting it to be solved, without really taking any sort of accountability for it. Another thing, like in terms of technology, we talked about this as well, but I'm learning a lot about AI and tech these days. And I feel like now is a very important time in just how much advancement and how much development there is, especially in like generative AI. And initially, it's sort of, I feel like the older generations, it's kind of scary, or just something, it's like, oh, I don't understand it. So, it's just not necessary. At the same time, though, I feel like it's coming out so much in terms of how helpful like it is, for the youth, and how much it's being utilized now. That's not something that I guess previous generations were able to do as well, because it was easier to say that just because I'm not used to this, it's not something that I want to really delve into. For the youth, though, because we grew up with that technology, with like these new things coming out every few years, there was a lot more for us to look at. There was a lot more fascination surrounding it. And I mean, 100%, I feel like it's going to be very important in the future, considering sort of how much space it's taking up, even in terms of professional careers and occupations, and how essentially we don't need people as much as we did. So that's another thing that I guess everyone's just going to have to sort of deal with, regardless of what initially how we approached it. I guess another thing that I see is just the faith, the hope, like the belief is sort of increasing with generations. And honestly, like there could be several reasons behind this. I'm honestly very interested to see why that might be. But I feel like just these days there's a lot more hope within the youth, whether that's about world events, crises, whether that's just about general things, smaller things that you feel passionate about. So for me personally, I started an organization by the name of This Is Us, and the aim of it was essentially just broadly to build confidence in girls at a young age, in Pakistan. So the reason that I actually started this was after I dealt with an experience of sexual harassment, and I feel like the approach to even something like that might vary within generations, because after something like that, I was able to speak to my family, my mom, my aunts, about all of this. And it is something that is very common. And just their approach to it was very different to mine. So for them, it was very much, yeah, it's happened several times. And I guess it's sort of part of just being a woman. But that doesn't mean that you don't really do anything about it. I feel like obviously because of also the culture that you're a part of, where you grew up, there will oftentimes be restrictions. But obviously, thankfully, I had people around me and my family that was encouraged me to act rather than sort of just let that go and just shut it aside. So just that sort of drive, that feeling like there is something that can be done, or there is something that you can do about it, rather than taking it from a very negative perspective, or being like, oh, like you can't really change anything, and what's done is done. So This Is Us was sort of, I guess, the way that I coped with that. And we were able to sort of build such a large community of around 300 plus girls today. And we've had several workshops, programs, Girls for Climate Justice. So now sort of delving into different areas just from that one incident. And I think I've seen this play out a lot in my generation, as opposed to previous generations. And I think that slowly is definitely growing. So I guess in summary, it's just about that hope. For me, that's the most important differing point, because while I don't think that there's, no hope, I feel there's hope within people in general, but at the same time, just being able to act upon that, I feel like that really is increasing within our generation and future generations,
that's
with the
terrific.
mentorship.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
let me highlight the one thing that you said, if I were to generalize to your generation, and that is that you are prepared to hold society accountable, to live up to its ideals, where the older generation might pass it off as, well, that's just the way things are. It's not great, but it is the way things are. And you folks say, no, it should change, and it should be better, and we should do better things. So I can't thank you enough for the initiative that you're doing and for that contribution to our conversation. Well, I've saved the best for last, Lucio. We're ready to hear about another older generation. And I think we talked before about experience and the experience that we have had as we bring our ideas to the future. So Alethea or Lucio, do you want to add your contribution to this conversation? Turn on your microphone. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. The first, I was also 18 years old.
Yes.
Very important that I have 71 years old, but anyway, I was also 18 years old. The first difference is that the new generations speak and the old ones present in PowerPoint. And then I present in PowerPoint a small slide because the time is short. Yeah. The first difference between the both generation is the new generation or millennials and centennials have a lot future, very many future, 70, 80, or inclusive 1 century the future. And there's little care about it. Many few little care about the future in this generation, the millennials, centennials, and G generation. But the old generation, the generation X and baby booms, Guillermina and me and you, Peter, are baby booms in the baby boom generation, have a little future, few times, 10, 15 years maximum, or more, but it's very impossible 30 or 40 years for us. And this is very important, we care a lot about the future. The old generation in the world take the decision, make the public politics, invest and support the global economy, the global society, the global policy, and others. Is very important about the TIA, TAI, and others, let's see, said that the climate change, the inequity, the insustainability in the relation, economics and social, the exclusion, the minorities. See, yes, it's true, but the generation preoccupate and charged and working and invest and manage the problems in the world is the generation X and baby booms. First, the second is the history.
Lucio, you have a lot of slides, and we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. So can you go a little bit faster so we can end on time?
Two slides.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Colombian cosmogonic city regions, see,
Yes.
of 20 centuries, 20th century is very important, but it's many important Caral Super Valley region. 30 centuries, 30 centuries, they are in a Neolithic ago had social organization, territorial organization, delimitation of lifestyle, comfort laws, and customs. Because I speak about this, because the more important in future studies, the more important in teach the future, the more important in future research is the need to get together and reach consensus on how to live well. This is a message. This is a message. The new generation, the old generation, the intermediate generation must take conversation, put on poner en bueno make consensus about the how no climate change, not inequity, not see, but is not sufficient, but is very important, but no sufficient in a protest or other things. I think that the baby booms are the generation more emotional and generation more technologically adapt in the last 70 years. Is very important. Consider the experience, the acknowledgement, the lifestyles of the old generation, but no how imitation. Yes, about the of learn about about those.
Good, wonderful. Thank you very much, Lucio. It's a very inspiring concept that 5,000 years ago, people were asking these same questions. they were concerned about the future, just as we are, and it is something that we should obviously pay attention to. Well, this has been terrific. I want to thank you all very much for adding to the conversation. While this is going on, I realize I am committed to recording not only the machine recording, but to write this up as a little essay. We post blogs on our website, teachthefuture.org, and I'm going to try and summarize, and I'll send you copies of it, what I think this was a very important conversation. It's a question that is not asked enough, I don't think. And I've learned a lot from both the young and the older members of our panel. And I want to thank you all for participating with us. Intergenerational dialogue is the only way we will, not the only, but one of the most important ways that we will confront and create a better future, not just for ourselves, but for our children, grandchildren, and future generations, which is something that we believe that we have a responsibility to and the ethics to carry it out. So I think we all can agree on that, and we need to keep talking about these things. So thank you, Alethea, for scheduling our session. It's been wonderful. Congratulations to the Federation for 50 years of work in future studies. almost as old as Guillermina and Lucio as as we are. And thank you, Catherine, for hosting us. It's wonderful seeing you again. Thank you to our younger panelists who are offering such wonderful insights into the future, and absolutely great. So thank you all. Thank you. Goodbye. And we will. I'll publish a little blog about this in as soon as I get the recording. Okay. Right. Goodbye, everybody.
Catherine, Tia,
Yes.
and
Buenos dias.